It's 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. You walk through the front door. Keys still jangling and your dog is already there, whole body moving, tail swinging side to side, nose bumping against your hand. You drop your bag, give them a quick pat on the head, and say the same thing you always say, "Hey buddy, I missed you too." Then you kick off your shoes, pull out your phone and sink into the couch. And just like that, the reunion is over, 30 seconds, maybe 40. You believe that tail wag told you everything you needed to know, that your dog is fine, that whatever happened in the 8, 9, 10 hours you were gone has already dissolved. Because dogs live in the moment, right? They don't hold grudges, they don't keep track. That's the story almost every owner tells themselves, and it's wrong. Here's what you didn't see. Before you turned that doorknob, your dog had already been standing near the door. For 11 minutes, not pacing, just standing, ears shifting between the hallway sounds and the silence of an empty apartment. When your key hit the lock, their breathing changed before their tail ever moved. And that full-body greeting you read as pure joy, part of it was, but part of it was something closer to relief. The kind that floods a nervous system that's been holding tension all day, with no way to discharge it. You missed that though because the wag looked the same as yesterday and the day before and every day before that. So you stopped looking closer, you read the movement and skipped the posture. You saw excitement and missed the whites of their eyes. You caught the spin at the door and never noticed the lip lick right after. The brief freeze when you reached over them for the remote, instead of staying at their level for 10 more seconds. Most people aren't cruel to their dogs, most people adore them, but adoration and understanding are not the same thing. And the gap between what you think your dog is telling you and what's actually happening inside their body is where the real damage quietly accumulates, not in one dramatic moment, not in one obvious mistake, in the small, invisible misreads that repeat every single evening, until the dog who used to sprint to the door starts walking, until the dog who used to lock eyes with you across the room begins looking away a half-second sooner than they used to. You won't notice the shift the day it happens. You'll notice it months later and you'll have no idea when it started. That's what this is actually about. Not the things you did wrong on purpose, the things you never realized you were misreading at all. Now drop yourself 12 inches off the ground, forget what you know about love and loyalty for a moment. Down here, the world runs on a completely different operating system. Your dog's brain isn't asking if you care about them, it's asking one question, on a loop every few seconds. Am I safe right now? That question is managed by a structure you will never see. But your dog is never free from it, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis. Think of it as a biological command center buried deep in the brain, constantly sampling the environment for signals of predictability. When the environment makes sense, when the same action produces the same result, the axis stays quiet, cortisol stays low. The parasympathetic nervous system hums along, digestion works, muscles stay loose, breathing slows. But the second the rules stop making sense, that axis fires. When you laughed at the sock on Tuesday and screamed about it on Wednesday, your dog didn't experience a mood swing. Its sympathetic nervous system registered a threat that appeared from nowhere. Adrenaline flooded the bloodstream, heart rate spiked. The pupils dilated not because the dog was scared of you specifically, but because its internal threat detection software just received contradictory data from its most important environmental variable, you. And here's what most people never consider. When you reached down and grabbed that chew toy off the living room floor, you didn't just take an object. You triggered a resource loss signal in a brain that evolved over 15,000 years to treat unpredictable resource disappearance as a survival emergency. The dog's cortisol didn't spike because it loved that toy, it spiked because the environment just proved, again, that valuable things vanish without warning and without negotiation. Stack these moments: Tuesday's sock, Wednesday's shout, Thursday's stolen chew. Each one deposits another thin layer of cortisol into a system that was never designed to clear it this fast. Researchers call this allostatic load, the cumulative cost of a stress response system that never fully powers down. The dog isn't holding a grudge, it's carrying a chemical backlog that rewires how its nervous system interprets every single thing you do next. So when your dog starts dragging toys under the couch, when it flinches at a hand that has never struck it, when the tail drops half an inch lower each week, that isn't emotion, that's a nervous system recalibrating its threat map around the one variable it cannot control and cannot escape. And by the time you notice the behavioral shift, the internal chemistry has already been running in emergency mode for weeks. The signals were there long before the visible symptoms. They were just spoken in a language no one taught you to read. Here's where it stops being about feelings and starts being about chemistry. When you wrap your arms around your dog and hold them against your chest, their adrenal cortex doesn't interpret that embrace the way your brain does. The HPA axis fires a cascade that dumps cortisol into the bloodstream within seconds. Not because your dog hates you, because their proprioceptive system, the internal map that tells every muscle and joint where the body is in space, just registered immobilization. And in the neurological architecture of a canine, immobilization has exactly one meaning: you have been caught. That stiffened posture, the lip lick, the slow yawn, those aren't quirks, those are the sympathetic nervous system slamming the emergency brake, while the body decides between freezing and fleeing. You were reading affection, their biology was reading a threat that pinned all four limbs in place. Now stretch that same logic across to the garbage on the kitchen floor. You walk in, you see the mess, you call them over with that voice, and the cortisol spike hits again. But here's the part that shatters the human assumption entirely. A dog's associative memory window closes in roughly 30 seconds. By the time you're standing over them pointing at the trash, their hippocampus has already filed that event under finished and irrelevant. The lowered head, the averted gaze, that isn't guilt, that's the HPA axis responding to a sudden hostile shift in your posture and vocal frequency. Their vomeronasal organ is pulling volatile stress compounds straight off your skin before you even finish the sentence. They aren't connecting your anger to the trash, they're reading your body as an unpredictable source of danger, and their allostatic load ticks upward by another notch. Do that enough times and something measurable changes. Chronic cortisol elevation suppresses the parasympathetic nervous system, the very branch responsible for rest, digestion, and the calm state which you might mistake for a happy dog. The vagus nerve, which should be toning the heart rate down and signaling safety through the entire gut-brain corridor, starts losing that fight. What you end up with is a dog whose baseline anxiety sits permanently higher than it should. Not because of one bad moment, but because of dozens of invisible micro-activations their body was never designed to absorb at that frequency. The science doesn't care whether you meant well, the biology just keeps a running tab. And right about now, something heavy is probably sitting in your chest. You're scrolling back through every moment you nudged your dog out from behind the couch to meet a stranger, every time you raised your voice over a tipped trash can, every night you scooped them off the floor while they were deep asleep, because they looked so peaceful you couldn't help yourself. That weight you're feeling has a name, and it isn't guilt, it's a mismatch. You grew up in a species that wraps its arms around the people it loves. A species that uses direct eye contact to say "I see you," to say "I care about you." A species that raises its voice not always out of anger, but out of sheer frustration that the message isn't landing. Every single instinct you brought into your relationship with your dog was inherited from thousands of years of human social wiring, and your dog brought a completely different operating system to the same conversation. Their autonomic nervous system reads pressure around the torso as restraint, not comfort. Their amygdala processes a raised voice as a threat cue, not a correction. Their startle reflex during sleep doesn't pause to check whether the hand reaching for them belongs to someone who loves them. None of that is a design flaw in your dog, and none of it is a moral failure in you. You were reading their stress signals through a human filter, because that's the only filter you were ever given. The disconnect was never about intention, it was about translation. Two mammals sharing a home, sharing a bed, sharing years of genuine affection, but running on entirely different neurological software. And the fact that you're still here, still listening, still willing to understand what those subtle signals actually mean, tells you something important about the kind of owner you already are. You didn't break anything, you just didn't have the vocabulary yet, and vocabulary can be learned in a single afternoon. This doesn't mean you failed your dog. Most owners were simply never taught to notice the earliest signal before the visible reaction. So here's what I want you to do. Not tomorrow, not after you finish reading some training book or watching another 12 videos, tonight. When you get home, or right now if your dog is somewhere near you, I want you to sit on the floor. Watch your pet closely tonight. Which tiny signal looks different now that you're looking for safety and stress instead of just looking for attitude? Leave that detail in the comments.